Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's virtual program, Balanced Impact, Avoiding Burnout and High Demand Roles with Leah Marone. I am Brittany Spillman, and I have the privilege of serving as the director of the Carey Center's Community and Collegiate Programs. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors who make programs like this possible. Our presenting sponsor for today is the Walker Area Community Foundation, a nonprofit grant-making organization that works every day to build permanent resources, spark meaningful conversations, inspire action, and empower partners to make a difference. We are also grateful to our community and collegiate program sponsors, Auburn University Outreach, the Kim and Tim Hudson Endowed Fund for Excellence, Auburn University Outreach Office of Public Service, the Drummond Thorne Stooks Endowed Fund for Excellence, and a community service grant made possible by State Representative Joe Lovern. It is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Leah Marone is a psychotherapist, Yale clinical instructor, and corporate mental wellness consultant with over 20 years of experience. A former Division I athlete, she specializes in high achievers struggling with imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and performance anxiety. Leah has conducted over 20,000 therapy sessions and contributed to Psychology Today, Newsweek, and The Atlantic. She works with organizations on burnout prevention, boundary setting, and emotional intelligence. A sought-after speaker, Leah has presented her support, Don't Solve framework to leaders nationwide. Her book, Serial Fixer, releases this year, exploring the hidden patterns of overfunctioning and how to break free. Please join me in welcoming Leah Marone.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I really appreciate it. And I was very excited to be able to talk to this group today. And before we get started, if some of you are able to put on your cameras, I would love to see your beautiful faces, if that's a possibility. And I know that all of you, or I'm assuming that all of you, thank you, Brooke. Thank you. Thank you, Casey. I know that all of you are probably transitioning from something and moving into this. And before we get started, I would just love for you, because I think we're a little out of shape when it comes to this. Just see around you, your physical space, and see if there's anything that you can remove, that you can set a boundary with, that you can, omit, that might be a distraction, that might pull you into kind of that multitasking mode. So if there's anything that you can clear clutter around you to provide this space for yourself and be here, that would be amazing. And not that I expect you to hang on every word that I'm saying, but I think sometimes using this next 45 minutes or so to kind of get in practice with just being present and giving yourself permission to just be here, right? So externally, kind of clearing some of the clutter, setting some boundaries with your workspace or currently where you are, but then also take note of where your mind tends to go during this time. And if you're thinking about your grocery list, or you're rehashing the meeting you just had 10 minutes ago, or you're thinking about that email from 3 days ago, or even futuristic thinking, what I'd love for you to practice and get a few reps in is just if you have a piece of paper near you, or something that you can even do a mental note, but just writing down that thing, meeting, email, grocery list, talk with my daughter later, whatever it is. But if something is bombarding you, I want you to write it down. I want you to validate it, but also set a boundary that I'm attending this webinar right now. I'm doing something for myself, and I am validating that this thought is there. It is important, but I am going to deal with that when I have the space. And so just getting some repetitions in that, because I think there's such a push, there's such a tendency for us to fill every single crack and crevice, for us to be productive, for us to get ahead of the game, for us to fear if we're not. And most times when we're working so frantically to feel relief later, again, we're out of shape with that and we don't typically get to recover. And so let's take this time to get a few reps in as you're sitting here and doing this for you. Okay. And Jennifer, I appreciate that. I'm not giving up my snack. Please enjoy that. That is A-okay. Thank you for sharing. And please use the chat. I'm going to do my best to monitor the chat as I'm talking. I know Brittany's going to help me out with that, but let's make this as interactive as possible. Of course, I wish I was in the same physical space with all of you, but I'm so thankful that we have this. So please interrupt me if you have questions, if you have comments. Let's make this as interactive as possible. And so I want to start off with just a check-in, right? And whoops, where is it? Oh goodness, never mind. I didn't have that slide. I want to start off with just, again, glamorization of stress. I talked a little bit about this just a few minutes ago when it's transitions, when it's, kind of pulling into, I have to get this done, I have to rehash this. We're flying by the seat of our pants. We have a lot of roles and things that we are juggling. But oftentimes I'm asked, are we in a mental health crisis? And a lot of it, I think, boils down to as much as logically we're like, oh, I know we shouldn't glamorize stress. I know that we should be as present as we can. Emotionally and other protective parts of us aren't always on board. And so many times I'm seeing that people are disengaged when it comes to present communication, when it comes to presently and, showing up in physical environments and roles. We're sidetracked, we're multitasking. And we're kind of seeing this cyclical exhaustion. We're seeing this, kind of, I'm always exhausted. I'm always this. When one thing kind of comes out of my queue and my plate clears a little bit, there's like five things on deck. And so we're seeing this urgency. We're seeing this, queue that's just forever long. And also, the real kicker is I am making an assumption that given what I know all of you do, probably in the nonprofit sector, and typically when I work with people in the nonprofit sector, whatever role they occupy, they typically have high levels of compassion and empathy. They are amazing space creators. They want to do good. They want to help. They really, thrive with bringing positivity into the world and making an impact. And this is not just in the nonprofit world, this is with education, this is with human resources, this is with mental health. Typically, when we're drawn to fields that require that high level of emotional intelligence and empathy and compassion, individuals such as yourselves, and again, call me out if you beg to differ, tend to not be that great at setting boundaries. We're very good at coaching people on them. We're very good at saying, take care of yourself so you can take care of others, and self-care is important. But when it comes to our own execution of setting boundaries, of saying no, of keeping our self-care consistent and not overextending and overreaching and filling every crack and crevice, we tend to have a hard time with that. And so we're going to talk a lot about boundaries today, and kind of not just the external ones, and not just, and we're going to go beyond the just say no, because as nice as that sounds, it's incredibly hard to execute because there's a lot happening internally that prevent us from externally saying no, or my plate's really full, or explain to me what my role is in this. We tend to go into fixer mode. We tend to, go into overextension mode. And that's where I want to hit today is kind of the internal boundaries and internal conflicts that happen that prevent us sometimes from, limiting and really working within our realistic capacities. Does that sound good? Any questions or thoughts as I jump into that? Okay, checking the chat. Okay, thank you. I see some thumbs up. Okay, great. And just the word boundaries in general, I'm going to ask you all. I know I have, of course, kind of the definition here, but regardless of if you're reading this, regardless of whatever, but like when you just even hear the word boundaries, what comes to mind for you? What comes to mind? What association do you have with that? I'd love for you to chime in the chat. When I just say the word boundaries, what comes in your mind? Okay, structure, protection, limits, rules, giving myself space, hard stops. Rules, stop. Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing, I mean, as a clinician, I love that boundaries are more, it's a term, it's a word that we're talking more about, right? It's all over social media in some respects. It's all over, it's actually made its way into corporate America. I know it's in the nonprofit world. I love that as a clinician. But we often sometimes forget that boundaries are not necessarily things that we set in hopes that other people will just magically follow them. It's actually collecting the data, and it's understanding certain responses, certain behaviors of other people, of situations, how we respond, and setting certain boundaries so that, for us, we can only control us. Right. And I think that's where that is misconstrued a bit. I have several patients that I work with that, I had one last week say, I'm setting the most amazing, I'm so proud of myself. You'd be so proud of me. I'm setting this great boundary with my mother-in-law, and she just keeps bulldozing right through it. And so it's not exactly, again, communicating something and thinking everyone is, now supposed to adhere to this, is supposed to adjust, and this is my boundary. It doesn't work like that. And that's frustrating, but it's oftentimes how we control and how we adjust our behavior in response to what's going on. And so, again, when we think about overextending, when we think about jumping in to fix and solve, when we think about all of these things that contribute to us feeling purpose, feeling like we're a good team player, feeling like we're a good parent or partner, a lot of times it's also not within our bounds. And within the equation, we're not able to kind of consistently make space for ourselves for recovery. Okay. And so I am going to, here we go. My slides were a little messed up, but I wanted to ask you all these things. And a serial fixer is someone that has good intentions, high amounts of EQ, high levels of emotional intelligence, empathetic, is able to read a room very quickly, able to read if there's changes in a person, maybe their mood has dipped, their responses. You're savvy. People tend to come to you with their issues, their problems. You're a good listener, a good space creator. Again, highly empathetic, and you want to just help. And you fear that other people, driven by fear of, I want people to like me. I don't want to be labeled as anything negative. And so there's a fierce desire to please and stay in the good graces. And so I'm going to ask you these little check-in questions. If they resonate with you, go ahead and answer in the chat. You could say yes, no, you can answer if you feel comfortable, but I'm going to just start with the first one. I'm going to go down the list, and I'd love to just either check in with yourself, and you can either nod your head, you can answer in the chat, and let's just go from there. Okay, so the first one, you help others open up, but struggle to do the same. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You have trouble setting boundaries and overextending yourself. Mm-hmm. Your self-worth, and this is a tricky one that sometimes is like, ugh, hard to admit, but your self-worth is tied to being needed. Okay. Some mixed answers there. You often feel unappreciated or taken for granted. This is where maybe sometimes resentment comes into play. And of course, it's not fun to feel these ways, but sometimes that happens. Things are imbalanced in relationships. Okay. You attract people who heavily rely on you. Okay. All right. You frequently step into others' conflicts to mediate. This gives you a sense of purpose. This gives you an identifiable role. Okay. All right. I'm loving these. Okay. You neglect your own needs to prioritize others. Okay. All right. That was a popular yes. Okay. And you feel guilty or maybe have anxious thoughts when you can't help. Okay. Thank you for contributing. I know that was a bit vulnerable, but it looks like you're in good company. And again, the correlations that I'm seeing with people with high levels of emotional intelligence, with, high levels of empathy and compassion, there is this kind of need to please, to help, to fix, to solve, to alleviate other people from discomfort and prevent you from maybe feeling like, you're not doing enough, or people don't like you, or you're not a good team member, or you're not a good parent. And so there's this intense push to please and fill in the gaps and serial fix. Okay. And I want to ask too, and you can share this if you'd like, but how many of you have ever had a hangover before? Okay. How many of you are hungover right now? No, I'm kidding. You don't have to answer that. Um, I'm not talking about kind of the hangover that we think of when we've overindulged in a substance or a particular drink. But I'd like to talk about emotional hangovers because I have a lot of people, and actually, I've worked this year with a lot of nonprofit groups, and it was interesting how people would say, when we do kind of some different breakouts and activities, how people would kind of reflect on the fact that, once something is over, like with my work or personal life, like perhaps a project or a meeting that was causing a lot of stress, or a visit just from my in-laws, or a conversation that I needed to have with a friend that I was anticipating was going to be uncomfortable. Once those things that I really had to access resilience and really kind of, naturally suppress a few things to kind of stay focused and kick into this gear. After that event, conversation, visit, project, whatever it is, ended, I kind of expected myself to feel a bit of relief. But oftentimes I feel almost this like wave of anxiety and this exhaustion, and my mood shifts. And sometimes I'm, not necessarily pleasant to be around. And I remember the woman who shared this, and immediately we saw nods. We saw people saying, I can relate to this. And immediately we kind of pulled from the crowd and they said, I thought this was just me. And I questioned, the critical part of me will question, is something wrong with me? Am I not able to regulate myself? What's going on? And I really wanted to normalize that a lot of times, especially when we are constantly providing space for other people, and kind of have one thing after the next that are intense, require a lot of our energy and presence, we are more prone to emotional hangovers, especially when we are not carving out consistent time for ourselves to kind of clear our own clutter on our own timeline, and thinking about our internal balloon, if you will, when air is consistently filling it up and we are not mindful and consistent about when we let little bits of air out, our balloon will essentially pop. And your pop may look different from your pop and my pop, but a lot of times these hangover effects will happen, and the body and the mind are demonstrating that they're working correctly because they are clearing clutter for us. And so many people who struggle with sleep, which I know is a very common thing, whether it's going to sleep and just shutting off the chatter up here, or you get, for some reason you wake up at 2 a.m. and you're just like switched on. That right there, too, is the brain's way of saying, well, you know what? You didn't really clear this clutter proactively during the day, and we were flying by the seat of our pants. And you know what? I got to do this for you the best that I can. And it's going to be tonight at 10:30 p.m., or it's going to be tonight at, 2 a.m. So we can get a little bit of this clutter cleared so your balloon is not extremely full when you go into the next day. And so thinking about these hangover effects and how the body and mind, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I struggle with sleep, it's hard for me to be present, especially when I have something planned that is supposed to be for me or something that is enjoyable, I'm not able to actually be there. And that too lets you know that you are maybe out of shape with clearing your own clutter. And the brain and body are kind of, you're relying on those two things, which they're on your team, but you're relying on them, those parts of you, to kind of clear it for you. And that's when we will get those hangover effects. Okay. Does that make sense? Are there any questions about that? Okay. If there are, please put them in the chat. And I wanted to ask, and this is kind of going into the internal boundary part, but I wanted to just briefly, talk about stress, anxiety, and really the differences. And I might be, kind of, this is something that you've heard, but it's a good reminder to remember that stress is something that is triggered by an external stimuli, something that is, externally we're a part of, we have to deal with, we have to get over, we have to execute. That could be that meeting. It could be flying somewhere for work. It could be going to the grocery during rush hour. These things that are external, and there's typically a start and an end to them. Okay. Anxiety is how the filter that we use to process these things, right? It's kind of the associations that we've made from a very young age. If then, if this, then this. If I work as hard as I can, if I reply to every email immediately, if I do X, Y, and Z, if I show up and I go above and beyond, then people will like me. and they won't ever think that I'm lazy and that I'm a good team player and I'm going to be in the good graces of everyone and I don't have to worry about it. And so these associations that we have on a number of levels that we typically create and kind of use as a foundational piece from a young age or as we're kind of growing, up and even growing in the professional world. Um, these really, can be very taxing and it's hard to sometimes rewire. But we're going to talk about that. And I want to share that these four questions, what can I control? What are my options? What is my role? And what can I let go of? Are four solution focused questions that when you are off to the races, when your body is letting you know and your mind is letting you know, yeah, our stress meter, we are climbing it up. We are climbing up and we are feeling all the bells and whistles. These are some things, these are some questions that you can share to kind of move yourself into this part of our brain so that we can actually add some structure. We can add some logic to the mix. And just even going through these questions, what can I control? It might not be much. What are my options? And just kind of going through all the different options. Some you may, execute, some may be silly in nature. What is my role? What can I let go of? Just even entertaining the answers to these questions begins to slice through a lot of the emotion and the intense emotion, uncomfortable emotion that couples and pairs with stress and anxiety. Okay. And on that note, I would love for you all to share in the chat. What are some things that you experience, either emotionally, mentally, or physically, that let you know, yeah, I definitely am feeling high levels of stress and anxious thoughts of how I'm processing that stress are really taking up a lot of internal real estate. What are some things, some bells and whistles, some symptoms, some whatever you want to call it, that you start to feel or notice about yourself that lets you know that you're kind of working up that stress ladder? Short-term memory loss. Yes, Lynn, you're not alone in that. Lack of concentration, yes. Replaying conversations, ruminating, feel like I can't swallow, tense muscles. Paying attention and sleepy, short temper. Yeah, I mean, irritability is huge. When it's hard for me to do self-care. Very tired. Yes, yes. Concentration, anger. And you can see based on a lot of these things, especially with the exhaustion, and just even, not managing certain tasks or, consistency goes out the window, how we're processing things might have a negative tint. You can really, I mean, it really does kind of confirm how much internal real estate a lot of, how we're processing things and kind of those anxious thoughts really take up. It takes up a lot of space. It's exhausting. It's very taxing on our energy. And here's the thing, even though, again, our bodies and minds are on our team, anxiety, especially anxious thoughts, I might say instead, are anything but present. Let me say that again. Anxiety, again, it gets a bad rap because it's uncomfortable, as you know what, but it is actually futuristic thinking or past thinking. And so we are either rehashing something from the past, we're ruminating, we're probably critical in nature of why didn't I do that? Why didn't I say that? They're probably thinking this. We're ruminating, rehashing. Our brain is trying to make sense of something from the past, fill in all the puzzle pieces from a puzzle that might have gaps in it. And it's very taxing. And you can see how that amount of energy is pulling us from the present moment. And on the flip side, sometimes anxious thoughts are about preparing, over preparing us to be ready for the what ifs in the future. What if they think this? What if I'm not prepared? What if this? Kind of this turbo gear of you need to be prepared as best you can for every single doom and gloom scenario. And anxious thoughts, as you know, they come in very strong, they come in very hot, if you will, and they go above and beyond and preparing us for the worst. And this futuristic thinking, this past thinking and rehashing, it does exactly that. It pulls us out of the present when as humans we feel most alive, when we feel like we are in tune with our environment, who we're talking with, our body, our five senses, and we're able to soak up exactly and everything for the most part about what is happening with us now. And so, again, these four questions: what can I control right now? What are my options right now? What is my role right now? Am I moving myself into a role of fixing and solving and kind of taking false ownership of something that's actually not mine? And what can I let go of? When you start to practice these and build some repetition around these, it will start to again slice through that emotional real estate and bring you back to the present moment. Okay? All right. If we have time for these, I want to circle back, okay? Unless anyone completely objects. You will get some of these at the end, but I want to circle back to those because I really want to, in essence of time, share this. Because as we're continuing to talk about kind of the internal boundaries that we can get better at and get some practice at, I want to introduce, and this is abstract, so I want you to hang with me. But I want you to think this comes from internal family systems model, which is a clinical model that I use a lot in my practice. But I think that just introducing a sliver of what this suggests has been a game changer for most of the patients that I work with the leaders I work with, athletes I work with, in just kind of helping you reframe anxiety and what's happening internally. And on that note, has anyone seen the movie Inside Out? You can just show hands. Yeah, it's a great movie. And that movie was based on internal family systems, where the little girl, the character, the girl, I'm spacing her name right now. She had, all of her different parts: joy, sadness, anger, all those parts within her. And I want to share that these parts of us, the parts of us that are uncomfortable, the parts of us are anxious thoughts, the parts of us that are critical, the parts of us that are like, if you don't do this, then people are going to think this. If you don't, think through this, if you do all these pressures, all these things that we are internally thinking and commentating about on a daily basis, these are protective parts of us. These protectors, think of them as bodyguards. Think of them as parts of you that are coming in very strong to prevent you from feeling what historically humans do not like to feel, such as fear, such as shame, such as embarrassment, such as being, irrelevant, lonely, isolated, disconnected. All of these things as humans that we work pretty hard at trying to avoid. These are what the protective parts of us are trying to prevent us from feeling. And I'm going to share a story. I'm going to be vulnerable for a minute and share how I have kind of moved this and changed up and reframed and changed kind of the dialogue that happens internally with me. And just to start off, I played basketball in college and I was an anxious mess. I was one of those players that I did really well in practice. The pressure wasn't there quite as much as in a game. I felt the mind-body connection. I could execute. I was on. I was confident. I was present. And once I got to game time, I have a fierce inner critic, and my inner critic would be ignited. Like, oh, we have a game? Oh, okay. Well, let me prepare you for this. What if, you miss that shot? What if you don't get to play? What if you don't start today? What if during warm-ups, everyone watching thinks, why is this girl on this team? What if you mess up? What if your team doesn't believe you anymore? What if your coach gets mad? All of these thoughts, you can see that cycling through these before game time, especially at a collegiate level, was not a good recipe. And I would play tight and I'd be in my head and I would not be able to access that flow and be present and confident just as I had the day before in practice. And I was given several, many advice from so many people that I highly respect of just forget about it. Just smile. Just, just sidetrack yourself. Just shove that part down. You got a game to play. And I was failing at that too. I couldn't do it because every time I just tried to, shove that down, I hated that part of myself. It's almost like, that protective part of me would get more ammo and fight back harder, right? And so it was so interesting. And I wish I would have known this in college. But as I started, with my clinical practice and started learning different frameworks and things like that, I've learned that those protective parts, that inner critic, Instead of trying to shove it down, instead of hating this part of me and thinking, what the heck is wrong with me? Does anyone else experience this? I'm a mess. This is just how I'm going to be for the rest of my days. I started to understand that this part of me and those anxious thoughts were trying to shield me from feeling some things that were uncomfortable, trying to prevent me from not executing the way that I wanted to. And so my whole relationship with this protective part of me shifted. And funny enough, when I began speaking probably 5, 6 years ago, guess who showed up? That critic, that inner critic in a different form. And before I would go on stage, before I would talk, she'd be front and center in my mind and say things like, what if you're not ready for this? What if someone asks you a question and you don't know the answer and you look like an idiot? What if you wore the wrong thing? What if you trip on stage? I mean, do you really think you ought to be doing this? All these self-doubt thoughts, right? And again, my tendency was, just ignore it. Just completely, give myself a pacifier, do this, try to distract myself and be on my way. No, I had learned that it was a different type of interaction with this part of myself. And so now, even before I speak, she shows up. And I normally now greet that part of me with, hey, good afternoon, good morning. I thought you might be here today. And I appreciate all the work that you do for me. I appreciate you trying to protect me from feeling embarrassed, from not being able to, execute. But I want to remind you that we've done this before. We actually signed up for this. And we generally feel some nervous feelings and the adrenaline pump in the first 2 minutes, but then we start to level out. So if you could stick around because I need you, you do good work. But if you could take a little bit of a break and move over a bit so the other parts of me, the ones that, are humorous, maybe engaging, maybe know what they're talking about, access that in intellect, can have a bit of the show, I'd really appreciate it. And so it's about soothing this part of you and reminding this part of you that is executed and flooded with self-doubt that you've done similar things before. You've gotten through a lot of things before. Maybe not this exact hump, but it's about fact checking, it's about reminding, it's about validating and understanding that this part of you, even when they're coming in with 10 bodyguards and you need one, is on your team. And so it's changing up that internal dialogue that you have with yourself, especially when it comes to anxious thoughts and self-doubt and imposter syndrome and all of those things that leave us tight, that leave us disconnected, that leave us unable to access the present and fire on all cylinders, right? And so it's our job now to think about working collaboratively with these parts to soothe them. If any of you have a toddler at home, or hell, even a teenager, think about if you kind of deliberately are ignoring this little child or this teenager and they're trying to get your attention and you're ignoring them, you're doing your work or whatever. This toddler or this whoever is going to get very creative to get your attention. Maybe start throwing things, maybe get louder, maybe, just anything that they can do to get your attention until finally you might respond with what? Right? Think about your protective parts, the self-doubt, the anxious spirals as almost like this internal toddler that is trying to get your attention. And the more that we suppress it, the more that we fill every crack and crevice, the more that we give in to urgency, the more that, we use substances or drinks or, anything to kind of numb and distract and pull away from doing the internal work. This part of us is like, feels kind of abandoned, feels like, geez, I guess I'm gonna have to get creative to get this person, who I'm supposed to be working for to listen to me. And so thinking about how we can reframe these parts of us and soothe them, just as we would that toddler, right? We'd get down maybe at eye level and we'd say, tell me what you're thinking. Tell me. And once they feel that you're validating, you're creating space, they start to soothe. They start to be with you and thinking about these internal parts of us the same way. All right. I want to just highlight very quickly, and again, you'll get these, but some of the most common, protectors, if you will, are our inner pleaser, right? And again, inner pleasers tend to come, they're very fierce and they're very dominant in people that have high levels of empathy and compassion. right? They seek approval, they seek external validation, fear of negative judgments, avoid confrontation, disappointing others, struggle with setting boundaries, over accommodating, kind of avoid or have difficulty saying no. And I love this comic because it's kind of like that masking of, I'm fine, everything's great. I don't want to, burden you with maybe my troubles or how I'm feeling. And then, God forbid, I don't want to have a negative vibe in the office or the family. So I'm just going to continue to shove this down and be merry. And you can see that their balloon is just, pulsating and air is just adding, to their internal balloon. But it's still with this mindset of like, I don't want to bring anyone else down. Right. And this is sometimes when we find ourselves overextending. And this is when we find ourselves fixing and solving and moving into roles that aren't necessarily ours or taking tasks that aren't necessarily ours. And when someone even, gosh, one of the biggest things I see is that when even if someone that you're working with kind of lets out a sigh or, oh gosh, I have so much on my plate, or at this meeting, we immediately will see that shift, see that discomfort in another person. And many of us go in immediately to fixer mode, right? Oh, well, let me just take that off your plate. You know what? I can go ahead and email them. You know what? Let's just do this. Let's rearrange that. We go into it, comes from a good place, but instead of validating, meeting that person where they're at, creating space, supporting, not solving, we go into trying to alleviate, try to be 5 steps ahead, try to take ownership of something instead of just validating. No, it does sound like it's been a stressful week for you. Instead, we're off to fixing, giving options, solutions, advice, all the things. And you can see that that formula, not just in work, but with our families, with our friends, is a lot. And it's premature. And I'm not suggesting that we don't still lead with empathy and compassion, but think about, am I supporting or am I solving? Am I jumping in to fix? Or am I actually just meeting that person, the situation, the complaint, the emotion, where it's at first, and allowing that person to keep ownership and me kind of work and follow their lead? I've worked with so many leaders that have so much false ownership regarding their team, where they think if my team's stressed, if my team's going through this, if my team, I'm just not a good leader. Everyone on my team needs to be, emotionally regulating, equipped, feeling confident, all these things, because if not, then I am not a good leader. And I hope you're hearing me saying that and just kind of chuckling a bit, but knowing like, wow, I sometimes have those very rigid associations myself. And you can see where that's the perfect recipe for overextending and having false ownership or stock in all these different things that aren't necessarily yours or that you are prematurely trying to fix and solve. That's the pleaser part. Okay, we have the critical part, which I know I kind of shared my own critic, but this is one where it fuels anxiety, exhaustion, fear of failure, embarrassment. This is where you get some perfectionistic tendencies. And all of these protectors, don't get me wrong, we need them. They do good work. Our inner critics are there to prevent us from to prevent stagnation, to be the best human that we can be, to keep learning, to keep taking risks, to keep moving forward. So we need to appreciate these parts of us and acknowledge what they're trying to protect and what they are trying, what they're motivated by. It's not a negative thing. It's just sometimes they're working way too hard because of past traumas, because of things that we've felt even at a young age that we're like, we don't ever want to feel that again. And you can see that it ignites these protective parts of us that are working frantically to prevent a hint or, keep us out of that whole arena of anything close to that feeling. Okay. Inner rescuer, right? This is where sometimes we feel that sense of purpose. Like if I'm not helping this person, if I'm not soothing this person, if they don't feel better after they've talked to me, then I'm not doing a good job. I'm probably not a great parent. I thought I'd be better at that. I'm not a great friend, or I'm not a great partner, or not a good coworker. And you can see again, as I'm saying this, it's like, well, you can't necessarily control how everybody else is feeling and executing, but our inner rescuer doesn't buy that. It's taking that false ownership and jumping in to fix and solve and soothe to confirm that we are a good leader, parent, coworker, friend, daughter, whatever it may be, right? And those associations that we have are incredibly rigid and they ignite these internal protectors in us. I know that was a lot. How's everybody doing? Do I need, I mean, that was a lot. Where are we at? Any questions, thoughts? Where are you? Yeah, let me know. I want to do a quick check-in. Okay. My problem, sorry, I'm just reading the chat. I have all of these, of course. My problem is I'm not sure whose validation it is I'm looking for. Oh, that's such a great question. Yes. So, and then the support don't solve, correct. So, a lot of times when we are thinking and kind of frantically and almost urgently looking for validation and just this confirmation that we are good enough, our worth is where it should be. And we are looking kind of for these external cues and external confirmations. Let's be real first that we're human and we do have egos. And it feels good for someone to kind of affirm us, validate us, and kind of, confirm that, like, yes, you're doing this or you're doing good work. That's wonderful. But a lot of times when that's not filling us up quite enough, and the protective parts of us are highly ignited, we're kind of finding ourselves in anxious thoughts. We're not doing enough. We're feeling stressed. We're feeling pulled. It's hard for us to be present. It's hard for us to consistently take care of ourselves. That lets us know that we're a little out of shape when it comes to the internal validation part, right? And doing the internal work of aligning and understanding what those, you know, false narratives, kind of those invasive thoughts, kind of those protective fears that we are maybe constantly feeling, what they're really trying to protect us from, and starting there to soothe and work with them. And if I bring myself back into the mix in that example, my inner critic, whether it was speaking, whether it was sports, whether it was whatever, was ultimately trying to prevent me from feeling embarrassed, from feeling ill equipped, from feeling, that I was going to be harshly judged or not good enough in the eyes of other people. Right. And that part of me was working so hard that it was counterproductive. And so it's thinking about ways, and that kind of brings us here. It's thinking about ways that, let's see, thinking about ways that you can start getting repetitions in with connecting with you and trusting you a bit more. I want you to think about that validation as almost like an ice cream sundae. And you are the ice cream sundae. You got all the fixins, all the things, you're good to go. And think about external validation when someone gives you a compliment, when someone affirms something, when someone, says, like, yes, that was great, excellent. Think of that as like sprinkles on top. You don't necessarily need them, but it adds to the sundae. It's nice. You'll take them, but it's not the core essence of what makes your sundae awesome. And so again, it's that internal validation, it's that internal work, it's understanding what your anxiety is trying to tell you, what, gets in the way when you think, I really do need to exercise more. I really do need to prioritize my sleep more. I really do need to shut my laptop off at a reasonable hour. And you have these amazing thoughts. You have this plan. Maybe, over the weekend, you concocted this amazing plan of how you're going to take care of yourself. I'm not going to eat this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to all these things. And you're really gung ho about it. And then come Monday morning, a different part of you surfaces when your alarm goes off earlier than normal so that you can get a workout in. And another protective part surfaces and says, yeah, that was a really good plan that we made up 2 days ago, but we didn't sleep great. And, we were up for an hour. And yeah, if we don't get enough sleep, we might be cranky. It's probably not going to do great. Is this whole workout thing in the morning really going to, be that good for us? Is it really going to make that big of a difference? You can see that those different parts of you were motivated and protecting different things. The part of you that had the forefront was motivated by, we got to kick ourselves into gear. We got to get healthier. We got to take care of ourselves. We're constantly telling other people to do it. It's time. It's time to be consistent. That part of you was motivated by, self-preservation and feeling better, fearing that something is going to happen to your health if you don't. The other party that surfaced at 6 a.m. on Monday morning that was craving the coziness of your bed and didn't want to get up was trying to protect your peace, was trying to convince you that, like, I don't know if we need to be this hard on ourselves. We do so much. And you maybe stay in bed, and later that day, your critic is blazing back at you saying, why didn't you get up? We had this grand plan. And so you can see how there's different parts of us, different thoughts, different filters, different things that take the reins. And it's our job to understand and not just, again, feed into these critical cycles and this critical self-talk. It's pausing and saying, what is this part of me trying to protect me from? When I try to set a boundary, when I try to have that conversation, when I know that I maybe should advocate for myself or do something that's very uncomfortable and may make someone else uncomfortable, and I don't do it, and I just kind of remind myself, I'll endure, I'll figure it out, I'll accommodate. Again, think about what that part of you, both of those different conflicting parts of you, are trying to protect you from. And that gives you a great starting point to gaining that internal trust and getting those repetitions in a different way. Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other questions based on that? Are y'all with me? Okay. All right. Um, so a lot of these things, just like if everyone on this call said, if Brittany said, hey, actually part of this program after we are done with this workshop, we're all running a marathon today. But I've been like, wow, that's amazing. How long have you all been training? And all of you kind of shook your head and said, oh, we haven't. We're just gonna wing it today. I'd be like, oh, and not that I don't believe that any of you could do it, but running a marathon is a big deal, right? You need a lot of practice, you need a lot of reps, you need that mind-body connection. It's a big thing for any human, right? And so thinking about too, like these things, just as we physically get in shape with something, as we train for something, it takes repetition. There's some bumps in the road. You're building those muscles, you're building that trust, you're building that stamina, that resilience in that way. Think about when you're working on maybe this reframe, when you're connecting with yourself differently, when you're pausing to think, what is this part of me trying to protect me from? What is this thought fearing? What is happening here? This takes repetitions. This takes, you building these internal muscles to gain insight, to collect data, to apply it, to begin to add yourself into the mix. Okay. Um, and so that's kind of to identifying some things for you that are non-negotiable. And I love thinking of my day. This may work for you, this may not, but I love thinking of my day in bookends. I love thinking I have an AM bookend and a PM bookend. And really, it's kind of meeting myself realistically that there are two times of my day that I really am going to make pretty non-negotiable and that I can control, and it's for me. And know that the middle might be all over the map, might be a big mess some days, might be this, might be that. I need to release control and execute that part of my day as best that I can, but know that I have these two bookends waiting for me. And here's the deal when it comes to self-care. It doesn't have to be, expensive, require a lot of time, require tons of effort. Self-care can come in a lot of different forms. It can be, too, the biggest thing is presence and getting in shape with being present. So thinking about now, just as we really capitalized or tried to think through our transition to this call. And even to think about in the morning, if you're someone who you love your cup of coffee, but you also are thinking about, but when I have my cup of coffee, I'm actually also packing my lunch, making breakfast for my children, feeding the dog, checking emails, and listening to news updates. And I actually don't actually really taste my coffee, but I know I drink it. Thinking about different things that you're already doing that you enjoy, that you can create as a bookend, that you can be present with, that you can set boundaries with and say, you know what, I love coffee. I'm going to carve out 5 minutes where I clear my clutter externally so I can begin to clear my clutter internally and go through my five senses and enjoy that cup of coffee. And those little bursts and those little moments when you're present and refrain from the pool to multitask and be productive are amazing. And they let air out of your internal balloon. I started working when I was I think it was during COVID. I caught myself at every red light, every stoplight, pulling out my phone. It was just automatic. Like, regardless if I was at the stoplight for 10 seconds or 40 seconds, what have you, I would just pull out my phone. I wonder if anyone texted me. I wonder if there's any news news updates in the last 2 minutes. I wonder if this. It was almost like I was programmed to fill every pause in my day with something that was either I was consuming something, I was being productive, and that was my association. And so I had to get some repetitions and I started setting a boundary and just starting with red lights. And every time I'm now at a red light, I use that time as much as sometimes I'm pulled to like check something to look around. What do I see? What do I hear? How do I feel? Whether it's in checking in with myself or just even looking out my window. I might be at the same intersection 15 times a week, but I'm always going to find something, see something new. And we're again we're not in shape with that. When we're in the elevator, when we're in the waiting room, when we're eating, when we're consuming, we're multitasking. And so thinking about all of the dozens of transitions throughout your day and how even if you capitalized on 25% of them and looked at those when you change locations, when you move into another room, when are brushing your teeth, when you're, getting ready for the day, when you're moving from your bed to your bathroom in the morning, these are all transitional times during the day. And we are so prone now to fill them and clutter them instead of using them as micro recoveries and micro resets to get better in shape with being present. Think about even if any of you go into an office and how many times, as you walk somewhere, as you move from one meeting to the next, we don't necessarily take that time to just debrief ourselves, to look around, take a mindful breath, to again proactively clear our clutter and let air out of our balloon. Okay, so if you take one thing away from today, think about how can I capitalize on some of my transitions? How can I view my transitions throughout the day, or at least even a portion of them, as micro resets, as a way that I can let air out of my balloon? And when you start to build that association, it's amazing how that right there is so helpful when it comes to our stress management. Okay. All right. And just a real quick check-in. I'm going to look for questions or comments, so please keep those coming. But I wanted to give you all, I hope you can see this. I wanted to just give you all an opportunity for a quick data collection or check-in on yourself, if you will. And so I'd love for you to look at this feel wheel. And just notice you can put them in the chat, you can just make a note of it, you can just mentally make a mental note. But how are you feeling right now? It could be 3 or 4 or 5 different things, and they could be conflicting emotions. The brain is capable of that. So I want you to just collect some data on yourself. I'll give you a minute because I know there's a lot of feelings on there, and I'm sure you felt all of them at one time and you survived it. You're here. Congratulations. So I'd love for you to just take some inventory on where you're at right now. You can do, Jennifer, one from each color, but you don't have to. It's more so however you'd like to do it. You may think, oh, I'm just feeling this. 1 or 2. You could be feeling 5. So it really just depends. And again, just to confirm, like the brain is very capable. We sometimes forget. I mean, think about grief. Sometimes we can be immensely or intensely grieving something, somebody, but also have moments where we feel happiness or joy. And sometimes our critic doesn't like that because it's like, well, if you're laughing right now, you must not be grieving. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. The brain is capable of feeling very different, conflicting emotions. Yeah. Okay. So all of you hopefully have collected a bit of data. And here's the rule. There's one rule. It's not, you want to avoid judging, having a judgmental lens when you are collecting data on yourself. Because a lot of times our critics may pop up, our inner critics, and think, this again? Why do I always feel this? I wonder if anyone else on this call is feeling this. I mean, God, I really got to get my stuff together. That's not what this is about. This is about data collection. This is about you checking in. This is about you creating space for yourself. It's not necessarily pressure filled where you have to do something frantically about it. If it's a feeling where you're like, oh, I feel this a lot. What's wrong with me? But think about too, just these moments, whether you're in the shower, whether you're at a red light, whether you deliberately look at the feel wheel again, but just collecting some data. How did I sleep? How does my body feel? Where are my thoughts gravitating towards? We don't collect enough data. And it's when you feel something or your data is confirming that you're feeling something, there's something, taking up too much internal real estate that you really wish wasn't there. That's when the work comes in, but only then. It's not about anytime we feel something uncomfortable to immediately overreact and judge and jump into like, oh gosh, what's wrong with me? I mean, think about if you woke up this morning and your calf was a bit tight, your calf muscle. I would hope that you wouldn't immediately go to the emergency room. Immediately. I would hope that there'd be some steps in between. I would hope that you'd collect that data and think, yeah, my calf is really tight today. Was it, okay, let me just see how maybe it'll work itself out as I even get up out of bed. And you notice though, maybe it did, maybe it's still tight in a way where you've maybe stretched it a bit. It's been a few days. That's when, again, you have some data to fall back on. It's been an extended a little bit more time for you now to go into like, all right, what can I control? What are my options? What can I let go of? What do I need to do maybe in this circumstance? Instead of again reacting immediately. And thinking about this with the high levels of empathy and compassion that you have, think about that in your conversations and your interactions and your relationships. When you're jumping immediately 5 steps ahead and trying to fix and solve and soothe prematurely, you're in a state of serial fixing. You're in a state of urgency. And so, thinking about just as we're learning to do with ourselves, where we validate first, we ask a few exploratory questions, we get a little more data, we're patient perhaps with it. Think about this with other people. When our children or whoever says, like, oh, I have so much of this, instead of jumping in and saying, let me email the teacher, let me do this, let me change this around, let me do this, because we think that if we work overtime and fix and solve for our children, then we must be we're a good parent. That's where I'm saying support, don't solve. Validate first. Meet the person or the emotion or the problem where it is first, and allow that person, whether they're 5 or 50, to keep ownership. And you still lead with compassion, but you are not there to grab it all and untangle it. You're there to help them pull at certain strings so that they can get their own repetitions in. They can build their self-trust. They can start soothing their internal protectors. It's not about creating these micro codependencies. It's not about putting all the weight onto you so that you feel purposeful and connected and a good parent, leader, friend, whatever it may be. It's about using your EQ to meet people exactly where they're at and validate first. Support, don't solve. Okay. Any questions as I kind of, gosh, I can't believe we're almost at time, but any questions, any thoughts? Um, I know I didn't get through all this, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay. All right. I would love to connect with you. I put my QR codes. If you have any questions or anything that you think of later as you're kind of marinating or processing this information, my email is up there. If you have anything that you'd like to share or just even ask, there's how you can contact me. So please do. I'd love to connect with you. And just a final note, if I don't see, yeah, I don't see any questions or anything. On a final note, I know Brittany kind of mentioned in the beginning, my book, Serial Fixer, Break Free from the Habit of Solving Other People's Problems, actually comes out in a month. So it comes out November 11th, and I am taking pre-orders. But this book talks a lot about those inner pleasers, inner rescuers, talks a lot about internal boundaries, external boundaries, and really kind of moving away from that fixer framework because I do think it is the biggest catalyst and ingredient for perpetual or consistent burnout and compassion fatigue and imbalanced relationships. So if you're interested in that too, I put the QR code there. And yes, again, if there's no more questions or comments, it's been so nice to see you all, and I hope this was helpful today. And please contact me if you have anything buzzing up there that you would like to ask or even just share. So thank you so much.
Leah, thank you so much for that inspiring program. For everyone joining us today, keep an eye out for an email from me. It'll have a link to the presentation and recording, a quick 3-question survey, and the opportunity to sign up as a Carey Center nonprofit affiliate if you are not already one. Our nonprofit affiliate program now serves more than 425 nonprofits across Alabama and beyond. It is a great way to access educational programs, professional development, and networking opportunities, and membership is completely free. We are also excited to share information about the Carey Center Nonprofit Professional Certificate. This is an online, non-degreed certificate developed in partnership with the Auburn University Office of Professional and Continuing Education and Merit Nonprofit Professional Development. Merit is an anywhere, anytime micro-learning platform that helps nonprofit professionals strengthen 6 key areas: leading, learning, resource generating, planning, managing, and overseeing through 28 different learning paths. Thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you at one of our monthly virtual programs or in person when our nonprofit training series comes to your part of the state. Thank y'all so much.